Ben Reynolds, who is the Deputy Chief Executive of Sustain. Ben's worked at Sustain since 2004 and recently worked with Jamie Oliver on a campaign to encourage the government to adopt the sugary drinks tax. He was a founding member of the Sustainable Food Cities Network and is a trustee of the charity school Food Matters. Ben.
I'll try the microphone. Just, is that the right volume, or is that okay? Is that okay? Mike, okay. I'm hearing Mike. Stand up. Oh. I'll just walk around too much. Okay, I'll go for it. Oh, cheers. Eat food, not too much, mostly plants. This was the advice from the writer Michael Pollan in his book, The Food Rules, 10 years ago. I think as a bit of dietary advice, you can't go far wrong from that. I would probably argue enjoy food rather than just eat food. But saying enjoy food, not too much, doesn't quite work. So how does that, as an ideology to live by, how does that work out in terms of government policy? And should government have a role in the food we eat, what we grow, who supplies it? Food, I think, is a really critical example of that kind of argument between nanny statism and let the market just do its thing. Just to explain a little bit about Sustain before I get stuck into that. So Sustain is the Alliance for Better Food and Farming. We don't have a banner. I can't see the walls for banners. So yeah, apologies. But yeah, do check us out. www.sustainweb.org. And we are an alliance of about 100 national civil society organisations who share our aims around creating a better food and farming system. And we do that through running lots of campaigns, projects, networks themselves of thousands of amazing people, amazing enterprises and groups, including people like the Brighton and Hove Food Partnership, who are here today, and groups all through cities across the country. And the sort of things we do with them are things like getting hundreds of caterers serving about 1 billion meals now to actually commit to serving demonstrably sustainable fish in their meals. Things like running a network of 50 plus food poverty or food power alliances, as we call them, trying to come up with local solutions to food poverty in cities and areas across the country. And things like setting up and running the world's largest urban food growing network in London. And around the time we set that up, we also worked with the Olympic Games to create the first ever major sustainable food policy for a major sporting event. But back to government's role. Trying to influence the national food policy, or national policy around food, is probably our bread and butter. So we, as Bryn said, we ran the campaign for a sugary drinks tax, working with people like Jamie Oliver and a gang of other experts, and with a lot of public support. And we won that despite the arguments around this nanny state. And I think getting the Tories to adopt a new tax is, I like to think, quite some achievement. In the last few months, we've been asking questions of government around their no-deal planning around food supplies. Cue silence. Getting very little response. Just this last week, we did get a response from government. We had it on record that they are not responsible for food supply. So I'd like to ask, I'm sure Sue would like to ask, what the F does the F in DEFRA actually stand for, if not food? They said it was the responsibility of food supply businesses. This was not the view taken by those food businesses who flagged up the likely problems that a no-deal Brexit will pose, particularly for food supply for schools, things like food supply for the most vulnerable people. This ultimately shouldn't be their responsibility. So what has this all got to do with climate? Resilience, I think, is probably one of the first things. We are in an unenviable position of becoming self-imposed world leaders in how to deal with resilience planning for the food system in the event of an emergency and large-scale disruption. It's just that, unlike with climate change, we're likely to be doing that the hard way and in the next few weeks. The sort of food shortages and price rises that have been predicted as we get close to this cliff will be mirrored, but obviously over a slightly longer period. We really, really need government to step up, to step in and do its job, which is, in the name, to govern. This issue has rightly gone up the national policy agenda, so Labour has just run their consultation on a food policy, which we look forward to seeing released soon, I hope. The Lords are doing an inquiry into food and the sort of dynamic relationship between poverty, the economy, public health and the environment. And Henry Dimbleby has been appointed to create a national food strategy as well. So in responding to these and drafting what we'd like to see in party manifestos, we return to the same points, the need for a holistic approach to these food issues. to see the impact on environment and health, animal welfare, and the importance of a thriving food economy and good livelihoods considered, all in one. But what does this mean for climate? So just to pull out a few examples, we'd like to see a shift in farm payments, the idea of public money for public good, particularly environmental goods. We'd like to see a support for just transition as these payments shift and as the market shifts to support those farmers and those producers who need to change. We'd like to see support for enterprises pioneering a more circular food economy, keeping value in otherwise waste ingredients and repurposing this for products like beer, smoothies, etc. We've seen some great examples of that, but that really needs to be turbocharged. Some have called for a meat tax. But first, I'd say let's look at the damage caused by some animal feed, for example. Imported soy in the Amazon, areas deforested for this very purpose. This is why we should be looking to support pasture-fed. Let's have a look at sort of import tariffs on the most damaging forms of animal feed. We need to reintroduce the age-old practice of using food waste for animal feed. This was, this was phased out for some very good reasons at the time. But let's bring it up to date and ensure that it's the right kind of waste and it's properly treated. Places like Japan and New Zealand are doing this, so let's make it happen here. And yes, things like promoting less and better, we'd argue for better meat, things like pasture-fed, things like organic. But particularly where taxpayers' money is concerned, in public meals and schools and hospitals, this should definitely be happening. I would also say there's like a curveball to throw in. We should make veggie the default in event catering at lunches. This would be a simple thing. We could get all the funders like National Lottery, Esme Fairbairn. We could get any government money that's going out when it pays for a lunch to make sure that it's veggie as the default. Let's make eating meat the kind of the sort of dietary requirement that you need to specify. Rather than specifying for veggie. This is a simple change. If people want to eat meat, that's fine. I like to eat meat. But I certainly don't want to be eating meat that's come from God knows where, put between two bits of bread that you always see at the end of these events. I'm sure a lot of you have been to those events where you see those horrible sandwiches left at the end. Food waste is bad. Meat waste is just, I'm not even going to say the word. I know I need to finish up, sorry. So, and we really need to make sure that food and farming is at the heart of Green New Deal as well. I know there's a few events on that today, and we've just put a blog up on our website about that. So I'm hoping we can talk to some Labour policymakers about how food and farming could be there. So to summarise, government does indeed have a role in food and farming. But beyond that, we should eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Thank you.